Ezra's hand tightened around the crystal glass just as the headline came into focus. Ronan Vale to marry Noor Khalid. The glass shattered before the pain registered. Shards fell at his feet. Red wine bled across the marble like spilled regret. For a few seconds, the world went silent. That name, her name, tied to his enemy. Ezra didn't move. He didn't blink. His heart didn't race. It stalled. A kind of stillness flooded his chest, the kind that only follows when something permanent has been broken. Have you ever lost someone, not because you betrayed them, but because you stopped noticing they were slipping away? That's how it happens, not all at once. Love doesn't always leave with slammed doors and screaming matches. Sometimes it disappears while you're still in the room, still holding hands, but already letting go. Ezra had loved Noor. He still did. But love, left unattended, becomes quiet. And Noor had been quiet for too long. He remembered her voice on the night she left. Not loud, not angry, just tired. I'm not walking away because I don't care. I'm walking away because I'm no longer seen. He didn't fight her that night. He thought she just needed time. He was wrong. But what if there was more to the story? What if Noor's new marriage wasn't about love or revenge, but about something far more complex? What Ezra was about to discover would change everything. If this story is already tugging at something inside you, don't just watch. Like, share, comment, and subscribe. We're not just telling stories, we're tracing the hidden paths that shape hearts. Before we go any further, I want to invite you into a moment of stillness, a moment to breathe, and to open your heart. Let's pray. Lord, teach us to value the people you place in our lives, not just when they stand beside us, but even more when their silence is telling us something we've ignored. Help us recognize the small hurts we overlook, the unspoken needs we walk past, and the gentle hearts we take for granted without meaning to. When pride blinds us, soften us. When our focus drifts toward things that fade, pull us back to what truly matters. If we've caused pain without realizing it, bring clarity. If we've lost someone through neglect or distance, guide our steps toward patience, humility, and growth. Protect those who are healing from old wounds. Strengthen those trying to rebuild. And for anyone listening who carries regret, show them that it's never too late to learn, never too late to change, never too late to love better. Give us the courage to speak, the wisdom to listen, and the grace to start again when the past feels too heavy. May this story remind us that second chances are real, and that hearts, with honesty and patience, can find their way home. Amen. Some wounds leave no scars, no blood, no blame, just silence, and space where closeness used to live. Ezra hadn't expected her to move on. Not like this, not with him. But maybe this isn't the story you think it is. This isn't about a man trying to win back what he lost. This isn't about power, wealth, or pride. This is a story about what's left behind when ambition takes the front seat, and love is forced to wait in the back. It's about a woman who refused to be invisible, a man who finally learned how to see, and a child who taught them both what it means to feel like home. You may think you know where this is going, but by the end, you'll realize some heartbreaks don't destroy us, they rebuild us. Let's begin. Before Ezra built towers that reached the sky, before his name sat on gold-lettered signs, above tech campuses, he was just a man with a laptop, a dream, and shoes with torn soles. There was nothing glamorous about sleeping under a leaky ceiling, hunched over glowing code while the world outside moved on. Ezra had learned early that comfort was a luxury, and he couldn't afford it. What he could afford was vision, obsession, long nights and silent meals, sacrifice. But what saved him from drowning in his own tunnel vision was Noor. She didn't fall for the man he would become. She loved the man he was, broke, stubborn, and still unsure of himself. They met at a community workshop on digital art and animation. Ezra was there for free Wi-Fi. Noor was painting portraits of strangers, offering sketches in exchange for coffee money. Her eyes were warm, but her hands never stopped moving, always drawing, always creating. He offered to build her a basic website. She offered to paint his first company logo. Neither one knew it then, but something had started, not loudly, not instantly, but quietly, steadily. Their first date was ramen and rain-soaked bus stops. Their first argument was over Ezra skipping sleep for code. Their first I love you came not in a candlelit setting, but during a grocery run. when Noor reached into her pocket to help him cover the bill he couldn't meet. They got married in a park. No photographers. No press. Just two friends, a borrowed arch, and a small crowd of people who knew what it meant to start small but dream big. Ezra promised her everything. And for a while, it looked like he kept that promise. He launched his first product 3 months after their wedding, a platform that helped small creators monetize their digital work. Noor was the first user. She called it Our Baby. That baby caught fire. Investors noticed. Ezra found himself in rooms he once could only admire from behind glass. The rise was fast, but with speed came separation. He didn't notice it at first, the distance. He called it focus. She called it forgetting. The first time Noor felt like a stranger in her own home was during Ezra's product relaunch party. It was held at a sleek rooftop venue, filled with executives in dark suits and women in stiff designer dresses. Noor wore something she'd sewn herself, soft blue, hand-stitched with little golden thread around the sleeves. She looked beautiful, radiant even, but out of place. Ezra was busy shaking hands, clinking glasses, throwing words like scalability and expansion like confetti. He smiled, but it wasn't the smile she knew. The man she married used to laugh with his whole body. That night, his face moved, but his eyes didn't follow. He kissed her cheek once, mid-conversation, barely making eye contact before, turning back to a venture capitalist who had just joined the conversation. Noor smiled anyway. She always did. Back home, Ezra fell asleep with his phone still in hand. She sat on the balcony, sketching by moonlight, and wondered when her voice had become background noise. It wasn't that Ezra stopped caring. He still told her he loved her. He still brought her coffee in the mornings, when he remembered. But something vital had shifted. Noor had once been part of the blueprint. Now she felt like an afterthought. Micah was born during Ezra's first $1 million quarter. Their son was everything Noor loved, expressive, curious, and full of light. She sang to him softly while feeding him, humming lullabies passed down through generations. Ezra tried to be present, he really did. But while Noor rocked their newborn, he paced the hallway on investor calls, whispering numbers, chasing deadlines. She never asked him to choose. She knew what building something from nothing required. But every day the warmth between them faded a little more. He missed her first art exhibition, missed Micah's first word, missed the way she stopped drawing for herself. And she never said a word, because sometimes silence is the only language you can afford when you're not sure your voice still matters. They still had dinners sometimes, sat on opposite ends of the same table, spoke about logistics, grocery lists, Micah's sleep schedule, but the intimacy had been traded, not for arguments or betrayal, but for schedules, screens, and silence. And Ezra, blinded by progress, thought everything was fine. He'd occasionally glance up and say things like, "We should take a vacation, or once the deal closes, we'll have more time." And she'd nod. But something in her had already started to close, not out of malice, not even out of sadness, out of self-preservation. The night everything changed, Noor found a folder on Ezra's desk while searching for Micah's sketchbook. She didn't snoop. She never had to. For years, their home had been built on trust. But one name on that folder stopped her breath. Ronan Vale. She read it twice, thinking maybe she misunderstood. Ronan wasn't simply a competitive businessman. He was known for deals that left others ruined. Noor had warned Ezra about him months ago, after hearing whispers from a mutual acquaintance. She told him Ronan destroyed whatever he touched. Ezra brushed it off with a half-smile, saying, "People talk. He's direct, not dangerous." But there it was, Ronan's signature on a confidential agreement. Funding, influence, access, power. All given to Ezra, without her knowing, without even a conversation. When Ezra came home that night, exhausted and distracted, he didn't even notice the folder in her hands. "Ezra, why him?" she asked quietly. He looked up, confused. "What do you mean?" "You told me you'd never work with someone like him." Ezra exhaled, rubbing his forehead. "Noor, this is business. It's temporary, strategic. I didn't want to worry you." Her eyes softened, but not out of understanding, out of something deeper, something that had been building for months. "You didn't tell me," she whispered. He stepped closer. "I didn't think it mattered." She closed the folder. That was the moment Ezra remembered for years. Noor standing there, still and calm, the same woman who supported. Him when he had nothing, now realizing she meant nothing in the decisions that shaped his world. No shouting, no slamming of doors, no tears. Noor simply said, "It mattered to me." He reached for her hand, but she stepped back, not in anger, but in finality. "I've warned you about him because I care about what you're becoming, but you don't hear me anymore." Her voice broke for the first time. "I don't need wealth. I don't need status. I need honesty. I need to feel seen." Ezra tried to explain, tried to promise, tried to assure her it was just a business move. But she wasn't leaving because of Ronan. She was leaving because he no longer knew how to let her in. Noor packed 2 bags that night, one for her, one for Micah. She kissed Ezra on the cheek as he stood frozen in disbelief. "This isn't about punishment," she said softly. "I'm tired of talking to someone who isn't really here." He watched her walk out of the home they built, the home she filled with sketches, music, and love. And he let her go. Not because he didn't care, but because somewhere along the climb, he had forgotten how to fight for the right things. He thought she needed space, time, a break. He didn't realize she needed more than he was offering, and less than he was chasing. By the time he understood, she was gone, and the silence that filled the house afterward was the loudest sound he'd ever heard. Has silence ever cost you someone you loved? Tell me in the comments. Your story may help someone else. 2 years, 730 days since Noor left. Ezra had counted, at first. Then he stopped, not because it hurt less, but because pain, after a while, stops announcing itself. It lives in the background, in missed calls, in empty chairs, in the smell of jasmine she used to wear, still lingering on a scarf he refused to move from the closet. He kept busy, or at least tried. The company expanded. Stock prices rose. He gave interviews with polite smiles and calculated pauses. No one saw it. Not his board, not the media, not even the assistants who walked beside him with color-coded folders and triple-shot coffees. But every time he opened his front door and stepped into silence, the truth returned. She was gone, and she wasn't coming back. Or so he thought. Until the news dropped. A morning notification blinked across his phone while he stirred lukewarm tea in an untouched cup. Ronan Vale to wed Noor Khalid, exclusive photos inside. At first he laughed, not out of amusement, but disbelief. A bitter, short sound that never reached his eyes. He clicked the link. It wasn't gossip. It wasn't speculation. It was real. Noor's face, calm as ever, gazed into the lens in a soft beige dress. No diamonds, no sparkle, just grace. Ronan stood beside her, hand loosely placed at her back. He wasn't smiling. Neither was she. But there was still something there. Not passion, not love. Control, maybe. Clarity. Ezra dropped his phone. It clattered to the floor. And for the first time in years, he sat down. Fully. Not to take a call. Not to type a number. He just sat, staring at the floor. Like if he stared long enough, it might swallow everything he'd missed. He didn't feel anger. He felt the weight of a truth he had long delayed facing. Noor had moved on, and he hadn't even started grieving. Ezra didn't go to the office that day. He canceled meetings, silenced his phone, told his assistant to postpone everything until Monday. He sat in the guest room, the one Noor used for painting, even though it had been empty for 2 years. The easel still stood in the corner, untouched. A few paint tubes had hardened in a tin box. The window had smudges from Micah's fingerprints when he was younger. He didn't cry. That would have been easier. Crying has an end. But what Ezra felt was shapeless, hollow, like walking through a house you built only to find all the rooms had been emptied without your noticing. He hadn't lost Noor today. He lost her the moment he chose business over presence. The headline just made it final. A soft knock at the door. Micah peeked in. "Dad?" he said, small voice, big eyes. Ezra turned. "Yeah, buddy." Micah held a crumpled flyer in his hand, an invitation to the school's spring play. "Can you come this time? Mommy said she'll be there. Maybe Uncle Ro too." Ezra blinked slowly. "Uncle Ro?" Micah nodded. "That's what I call him now. He brings me chocolate bars and listens when I talk about space. He doesn't know much about planets, but he lets me teach him." Ezra's throat tightened. "Do you like him?" Micah thought. "He's okay. He makes Mommy smile sometimes. Not the big smile, the quiet one. But I like when you come more." It's louder when you're there. It's louder when you're there. That stayed with Ezra longer than the headline. Later that week, through a former employee, Ezra confirmed what the world had already accepted. Noor had married Ronan. No reception, no coverage, no media parade, just a private civil ceremony. A few witnesses, close friends, no public displays. That alone puzzled Ezra. Ronan thrived on being seen. He weaponized attention. The old Ronan would have bought a building and proposed from a rooftop. This wasn't him. Ezra stared at the photo again. Noor didn't look sad, but she didn't look in love either. There was something deeper in her posture, something intentional, a choice, not an emotion. Ezra wondered what that meant, but mostly, he wondered what part of him still believed she'd wait. Ezra sat on his balcony that night, overlooking the city he once swore he'd conquer. Everything looked the same, blinking lights, muffled traffic, glass towers stretching toward nowhere. But inside, something had shifted. He wasn't angry at Noor. He couldn't be. She had waited, longer than she should have. She had stood beside him when all he had was a laptop and a vision. She had loved him with no agenda, and now she had married the one man Ezra once swore he'd never shake hands with, the same man she begged him not to trust. Why? What had changed? Ezra replayed every conversation they'd had in those final months, every look she gave him that he brushed off as just tired, every small moment she tried to share, and he missed. What haunted him wasn't the fact that she left. It was that, when she needed to be heard, he was too far away to listen. But Ronan? That didn't make sense. Ezra had known him for years. Ruthless, calculating, always looking to flip power in his favor. If Noor was looking for safety or warmth, Ronan wasn't the man. So why had she agreed? There had to be more to this. And then there was Micah. Every time Ezra looked into his son's eyes, he saw her, not just her features, but her strength, her steadiness, the way she never explained her pain. She just carried it until it became too heavy to bear. Micah didn't ask for a different life. He didn't resent Ezra. He didn't speak in guilt or anger. He just existed between them, a bridge neither parent knew how to cross anymore. Ezra watched him sleep that night, one arm draped over a half-colored drawing, the other clutching a plush rocket. How do you rebuild something you broke with your absence? You don't start by reclaiming it. You start by learning how to show up, fully, honestly, without excuses. Ezra didn't know how this story would end, but for the first time in years, he was ready to stop justifying. He was ready to listen, and he needed to understand Noor's choice, not for closure, but because part of him still believed she hadn't chosen Ronan. Not fully, not completely. Have you ever had to watch someone you loved move on and not fight to stop them? Let me know in the comments below. Sometimes your voice can bring clarity to someone else's silence. Ezra didn't start looking for Noor. He started looking into Ronan. It began as a boardroom issue, a flagged acquisition Ronan's firm made in a sector too close to Ezra's latest project. His legal team suspected it wasn't just a coincidence. Documents were being withheld. Asset movements didn't line up. And while the team focused on company filings and merger papers, Ezra, for the first time in a long while, started digging for himself. He didn't know what he was expecting. A breach? A pattern? Some backdoor connection that explained why Ronan, of all people, suddenly seemed quiet, controlled, measured. What he found was none of that. Buried inside a folder of filings was a wire transfer. Not abnormal, until he saw the recipient, the Noor Khalid Foundation. He frowned. He hadn't heard of it. And Ezra made it a point to know every initiative Noor ever put her name behind. He followed the paper trail, modest donations at first, then something larger, much larger. A single grant from one of Ronan's subsidiaries, enough to fund an entire staff and years of operations. The money wasn't hidden. It wasn't laundered. It was clean, direct, purposeful. But what stunned Ezra most was what the foundation did. It supported single mothers, young women starting over after abandonment or emotional trauma, struggling artists who had been told to be practical instead of creative. It sounded exactly like something Noor would build. But why had she never spoken of it publicly? Why hadn't the press picked it up? Ezra followed the links to the foundation's official site. There were no luxury galas, no loud endorsements, no viral content. Just soft colors, handwritten mission statements, and a handful of videos quietly archived under stories that matter. His breath caught as one thumbnail loaded. Noor, sitting cross-legged on a bench, Micah beside her, both of them mid-laugh. Not a scripted smile, a real one. Ezra hovered over the play button, but didn't press it yet. Something told him this wasn't for quick consumption. This was a piece of her he had never seen, not because she hid it, but because he hadn't looked. Ezra didn't want to watch it alone, so he waited until Micah came home from school. The boy's backpack dropped with a thud, and his shoes were off before he made it past the hallway. "Want to see something?" Ezra asked gently. Micah climbed up beside him on the couch. "What is it?" Ezra didn't answer. He pressed play. The screen faded in. Noor sat on a bench beneath a line of tall trees. A breeze played with the edge of her scarf, and sunlight flickered between leaves. Micah was smaller in the clip, maybe 6 or 7, sitting beside her, his legs swinging, a paper rocket in hand. The interviewer's voice was quiet. "Why did you start the foundation?" Noor smiled, the kind of smile that came from memory, not performance. "I once loved someone who couldn't see me," she said. Ezra's chest tightened, not because he didn't care, but because his eyes were fixed on a future that didn't have room for anything still growing. "I knew he loved me. But love needs more than presence. It needs participation." Micah tilted his head. "Is that me?" Ezra nodded slowly. "Yeah, that's you. On screen," Noor continued. "When I left that chapter of my life, I didn't want to build something out of anger. I wanted to build from understanding. There are so many women with dreams too soft to survive alone. I wanted to give them room, tools, support, a voice. And Ronan?" the interviewer asked. Noor paused. "He came to me with a deal, not love, a partnership. He wanted to change his legacy. I wanted to change lives. We agreed, no expectations beyond respect. Full control would be mine. No strings." Ezra leaned forward slightly, heart pounding. Noor looked straight into the lens. "I didn't marry to be rescued. I married to create space, for this work, for this mission, for myself. Sometimes what we need isn't romance, it's resources. And sometimes what we lose teaches us how to help others find themselves." Micah's eyes were wide. "She's really smart." Ezra didn't respond. He couldn't. His throat had closed, not from pain, but from clarity. He hadn't been replaced. He had been released, not out of revenge, but necessity. Noor hadn't moved on to hurt him. She moved in a direction he wasn't ready to follow back then. He had chased numbers. She had chosen impact. And while he signed deals in boardrooms, she built something lasting in silence, with the help of the man Ezra once swore would ruin everything. But Ronan hadn't ruined Noor. He'd stepped aside. Ezra sat still long after the video ended. Micah had wandered off to get juice, leaving him alone in the quiet hum of a screen gone black. His pride had imagined betrayal, but what he witnessed was grace. Ezra didn't call ahead. He didn't schedule a visit, didn't bring a team, didn't even tell his driver where they were going. He just typed the address from the foundation's website into his phone and arrived alone, wearing a plain shirt and jeans he hadn't worn in years. The building was small, 2 stories, warm brick, wide windows, no logos. Just a hand-painted sign by the front gate, "You are still worthy, even when it's quiet." He stood outside for a moment, unsure if he should go in. But then he heard laughter. Inside, a group of young women sat around a table, hands smudged with paint and clay. A toddler waddled between them with a juice pouch. In the corner, a teenage girl read softly to a child who clung to every word. And in the center of it all, Noor, not giving orders, not making speeches, just listening, guiding, smiling in that quiet way she used to when Ezra would get excited over small wins back in the early days. He stepped back before she could see him. This wasn't his moment. This wasn't about nostalgia. This was her world now, one she'd built from the pieces she refused to let bitterness touch. Ezra leaned against the wall outside, watching through the glass. He didn't feel ownership. He didn't feel jealousy. He felt thankful. For the first time, he saw her not as the woman who left him, but as the woman who refused to disappear when life didn't go as planned. He stayed until the building closed. He watched Noor hug every child, speak with each staff member, and pack away art supplies herself. No assistants, no titles, no cameras, just Noor, still leading with her hands, still soft-spoken, but never silent. That night, Ezra tucked Micah into bed and didn't rush through the routine. He stayed, listened to every story, laughed at every joke, even the ones that didn't make sense. When Micah finally drifted off, Ezra sat alone on the edge of the bed, staring at the same sketchbook Noor once used to map out their dream home. He opened it. Page after page held corners of a life they once tried to build, and maybe could still shape, not as it was, but as something new. He didn't know what Noor felt now. He didn't know if she'd ever let him back in, but he knew this: she never stopped becoming. And it was time he started again. Ezra hadn't planned to go. He'd heard about the event, a celebration of community leaders and quiet builders, hosted by the foundation Noor now ran in full. She was scheduled to speak. Photos would be taken. Local donors would attend. Nothing flashy, just purposeful. He sat with the invitation in his hand for 3 days. Then, without telling anyone, he pressed his shirt, left the cufflinks in the drawer, and drove himself. No chauffeur, no press, no agenda. He wasn't coming as the man people used to quote in tech columns. He was coming as the man who had once fallen in love with a painter in a borrowed hoodie, who believed in big things before anyone else did. He arrived early, found a quiet spot near the back, took his seat like everyone else. No announcements, no greetings, just eyes forward. Noor entered the room calmly, gracefully, as if she wasn't expected, but simply belonged. She wore soft earth tones, no heavy jewelry, no forced smile. The applause when she stepped up to the stage wasn't thunderous. It was respectful, warm. Ezra didn't blink. He just watched. When her speech ended, people gathered around her. Some asked for photos. Others thanked her. Ezra waited. In his hands, a worn leather sketchpad, its corners frayed from time. She saw him as she turned, and for the briefest moment, her face didn't harden. It paused. Not surprise, not irritation, just a pause. The kind that asked, "What are you doing here?" He walked forward, not with confidence, but with care. "I'm not staying long," he said softly. "I just wanted to return this." He handed her the sketchpad. She looked down at it, hands hesitating before they took it. Her fingers brushed the cover. "This is from," he nodded, "the night we dreamed up the lake house." She opened it, flipping to a half-finished drawing of a window framed by vines and lanterns. Her breath caught, but she said nothing. Ezra stepped back. "I don't want to interrupt," he said. "I just needed to say, I kept it all this time, because it reminded me of what we built before I got distracted by everything else." Noor didn't look up, but she didn't walk away either. Noor held the sketchpad close to her chest, as if touching it might unlock memories too old to speak out loud. She finally looked up. "Why now, Ezra?" Her voice wasn't cold. It wasn't angry. It was steady, like someone who had cried all her tears long ago and chose peace instead of bitterness. Ezra lowered his gaze for a moment, then met her eyes. "I spent so many years trying to build something that made people notice me," he said. "But I forgot to keep noticing the person who saw me when no one else did." Noor said nothing. "I didn't come tonight to ask for anything. I know I don't get to rewrite what happened. And I'm not here because I miss the comfort," he continued. "I'm here because I finally see how much of your love I left unanswered. I didn't betray you with another person. I betrayed you with my absence." The room faded around them, the sounds, the soft clinking of glassware, the distant murmurs of small talk. Noor's hands remained on the sketchpad, her thumb tracing one of the folded corners. "Do you think saying that now changes anything?" she asked. "No," Ezra said, "but maybe it changes me." Her expression softened, not with affection, but with understanding. "I begged you to look up," she whispered. "I begged without words. Every painting I left half-finished in the hallway, every night I sat next to you in silence. I wasn't waiting for diamonds or trips. I just wanted you to be there." "I know," he said, "and I'm sorry, not just for what I missed, but for not realizing I was missing it while it mattered." A long pause stretched between them. Noor looked past him for a moment, toward the table of staff volunteers gathered near the exit. Then she looked back. "You know what made me say yes to Ronan?" she asked. Ezra held his breath. "He didn't promise to love me. He promised not to stand in the way of what I wanted to build. He didn't ask me to be smaller. He didn't need me to be convenient." Ezra nodded. He didn't try to justify. He didn't try to compare. He simply said, "I respect that." Another silence. But this one didn't feel heavy. "I don't hate you, Ezra," she said finally. "I never did." That alone nearly undid him. "I don't expect to be forgiven tonight," he replied. "But if this is the start of something better, even if it's just being better parents to Micah, I'm here. Fully." Noor looked down at the sketchpad again. Her fingers rested on the page with the half-drawn window. She didn't smile, but she also didn't close the book. The event began to wind down. People shook hands. Chairs scraped quietly against the floor. Staff gathered near the stage to begin cleanup. Noor placed the sketchpad gently in her tote bag, as if returning a memory to a shelf she wasn't quite ready to dust off yet. She glanced at Ezra. "I'm parked out back." "I'll walk you," he said. She didn't object. They stepped into the hallway. No cameras, no waiting eyes, just quiet. The sound of their footsteps on the polished floor echoed slightly, filling the silence between them. But it wasn't uncomfortable. It was unhurried. Outside, the lot was dimly lit. Noor pressed her key fob, unlocking her car with a soft beep. Ezra stayed beside her. She turned toward him, not leaning, not stepping back either. "I don't know what you're hoping for," she said gently. Ezra shook his head. "Not hoping, just showing up, finally." That answer settled into the space between them. "You used to walk ahead of me," she said after a pause. "Even when we were just going to the store. I always had to catch up." Ezra looked at her. "Then maybe this time, I'll learn to walk beside you." A flicker, almost a smile, passed across her lips. It vanished quickly, but it was there. She opened her car door. "Good night, Ezra." "Good night, Noor." She slid into the driver's seat and closed the door. Ezra didn't move until she pulled away, her taillights blinking once as she turned the corner. He stood there for a moment longer, hands in his pockets, eyes on the space she'd just occupied. It wasn't a reunion. It wasn't forgiveness. But it was something, and sometimes something is enough to begin again. Would you take someone back if they finally owned their mistake? Drop a heart in the comments if you believe in second chances. Let's talk about what healing really looks like. Ezra used to fill his weekends with strategy calls, follow-ups, and unread reports. Even on his off days, his mind stayed tethered to the next quarter, the next pitch, the next leap. But not today. Today, he silenced his phone and took Micah to the art store. It wasn't planned. Micah had mentioned it casually in the car, his voice full of curiosity. "Do you think Mommy still paints when she's alone?" Ezra didn't know how to answer. Instead, he turned the steering wheel toward a small shop with dusty windows and shelves lined with brushes and colors Micah had only seen in Noor's old studio. They filled a basket with watercolors, thick paper, and a small wooden easel. Micah picked everything carefully, explaining which supplies Noor used and which ones made her special swirls. Back home, Ezra laid out newspapers on the kitchen floor. Micah set up the easel and asked if they could try painting together. Ezra hesitated. "I haven't painted since, well, ever." Micah grinned. "It's okay. I'll show you." For the next 2 hours they dipped brushes, mixed colors, and painted in silence broken only by laughter. Micah was focused, tongue between his teeth, eyes narrowed just like Noor's when she worked on details. Ezra didn't try to guide him. He didn't correct or question. He followed. By the end, Micah held up his piece. "I think Mommy will like it." Ezra looked at it. Wide strokes of orange and green, a curved rooftop, a single window framed by gold and blue. It wasn't just any painting. It was a recreation of one Noor had started years ago, an unfinished idea for a home they once dreamed of building, right down to the window ledge filled with books. Ezra's breath caught. "Where did you learn that?" Micah shrugged. "It was in one of Mommy's old sketchbooks. I remembered it. It felt nice." Ezra looked at the boy, his son, and saw more than innocence. He saw connection. Hope. Micah insisted on delivering the painting himself. He wrapped it in a sheet of white paper, scribbled for Mommy across the front, in red marker, and asked Ezra to drive him over to her office at the foundation. Ezra didn't walk inside. He waited in the car, watching through the window as Micah skipped to the door and was greeted by one of Noor's staff. Within minutes, someone called her name down the hall. She emerged from her office, her expression neutral, until she saw the paper bundle in Micah's hands. He handed it over proudly. Ezra couldn't hear their words, but he didn't need to. Noor unfolded the paper slowly. Her fingers paused when she saw what was underneath. She didn't cry in front of Micah. She knelt beside him, hugged him tight, and whispered something that made him nod. But when she walked back into her office alone, holding the painting against her chest, Ezra saw her wipe her face with the back of her hand, not out of sadness, but from the weight of recognition. That image, the window, the soft colors, the rooftop, was more than art. It was a memory resurrected, a version of herself she hadn't touched in years. She placed the painting on her desk and stared at it for a long time. Later that night, she texted Ezra, "Thank you for painting with him. He remembered something I forgot I'd taught." Ezra didn't reply right away. He read the message twice, then 3 times. There was no punctuation beyond that one period. No invitation, no rejection. Just a quiet acknowledgement. He sat with that. Some people expect healing to come like thunder. Noor had always preferred light that came slowly, enough to see by, but never so much that it overwhelmed. He sent a simple response. "He's teaching me too." There was no reply, but that was okay. Not every step needs to be met with another. Some steps just need to be taken. It started with pancakes. Ezra showed up one Saturday morning with a small grocery bag and Micah already bouncing beside him. He didn't call ahead, didn't bring flowers, just eggs, flour, blueberries, and a quiet tone that said, "I'm not here to fix. I'm here to show up." Noor hesitated at the door, then stepped back and let them in. She stood by the counter, arms folded but relaxed, while Micah dragged a chair over and declared himself the kitchen captain. Ezra let him lead, measuring, pouring, making a mess only a child could get away with. Noor eventually joined, folding the napkins, handing over ingredients, answering Micah. Endless questions about syrup and why pancakes are circles and not triangles. There was laughter, not loud, not forced, just real. Later, they sat around the small dining table, the same one Ezra once missed dozens of dinners at. The light fell softly through the window, the kind of stillness that wraps around a family when no one's rushing to be anywhere else. Micah looked up, chewing slowly. "Can Daddy come over more often?" he asked. "It feels warmer when we all laugh." Noor's fork paused. Ezra didn't speak. He looked to her, letting her lead, something he'd learned to do only recently. She didn't answer right away. She didn't have to. Micah had said what neither of them knew how to. Some things don't need fixing. They just need presence. After breakfast, Ezra offered to wash the dishes. Noor leaned in the doorway, arms crossed, watching as he worked. "You were never bad at being here," she said quietly. "You just forgot it mattered." Ezra looked over his shoulder. "I won't forget again." She nodded, then turned to help dry the plates. It wasn't a promise. It wasn't a reset. It was a small, shared rhythm. A moment that didn't belong to the past or the future. Just now. The press conference wasn't large. Just a few local journalists, some donors, and the foundation's team seated in rows. A podium stood at the front with the organization's modest logo behind it. Ezra sat in the 3rd row, quiet, unnoticed. He hadn't planned to come, but when he heard Ronan would be speaking, something told him to be there, not out of rivalry, but curiosity. Ronan stepped to the mic, no flash, no dramatic build-up. He wore a navy jacket, no tie, sleeves lightly rolled. His voice was calm. "Over the past year, this foundation has changed lives, including mine." He paused. "I came into this as a man who had built businesses, chased numbers, and made decisions without understanding their weight. I offered Noor funding because I believed in what she wanted to create, and I needed something honest to attach my name to." Murmurs rippled through the room. Ezra remained still. "But Noor didn't need my name," Ronan continued. "She needed freedom, direction, and space to build. I've had the honor of supporting that from the background, and today, I'm stepping away completely. The foundation is now under her full leadership." He looked out at the audience, then down at his notes. "She never asked me to give her anything. She simply asked that I not get in the way. That taught me more than any boardroom ever did." The applause was gentle, respectful, and when Ronan stepped down, he walked straight past the cameras and over to Ezra. They locked eyes for a moment. Ronan didn't offer a handshake. He simply nodded. Ezra stood. There were no words, just a slow, silent understanding between two men who, for different reasons, had loved the same woman and chose not to destroy what she was building. It wasn't peace written in ink, but it was peace all the same. No one said, "Let's start over." It didn't happen with a conversation. It happened when Ezra offered to help cook dinner without being asked. When Noor let him stay for coffee after dropping Micah off without watching the clock. When Micah placed 3 plates on the table instead of 2. Trust didn't come back loudly. It returned in pieces. Small, careful ones. Ezra didn't push. He didn't ask where they stood. He simply showed up. When he said he would, how he said he would. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they didn't. Once, while folding laundry, Noor looked up and said, "You're quieter now." Ezra smiled softly. "I'm listening more." She didn't respond, but she didn't look away either. One afternoon, Micah spilled juice on a painting Noor had been working on. Ezra grabbed a towel without comment, helped clean up, and told Micah, "It's okay. Mistakes don't mean things are ruined, just different." Noor heard that. Another night, Ezra fixed a loose door handle in the guest room. No announcement, no explanation, just the gentle sound of a screwdriver turning. Noor walked past, holding a basket of clean towels. She paused for a second, then continued on without speaking. These were the moments that mattered. They didn't rebuild what was. They built what could be. In the evenings, Ezra sometimes stayed just a little longer, helped Micah with homework, asked Noor about a book on her shelf, never crossed lines, never assumed. Noor stopped correcting the way he said certain things. She started smiling when he entered the room. Healing had no finish line, no announcement, but somewhere between second helpings and half-laughed stories about Micah's school projects, something shifted. Noor began to trust his silence, not because it hid anything, but because it no longer ignored everything. The night was clear. Noor sat on the rooftop, legs crossed, sweater sleeves pulled over her hands. A quiet breeze moved through the trees below. From up here, the city didn't feel so heavy. It just breathed. Ezra joined her with 2 mugs, one for her, one for him. He didn't ask to sit. He just did. They looked out at nothing in particular. The sky held no signs, no promises, just stars, steady and silent. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Then Noor said, "Do you remember the first time we talked about building something? Before the company, before the house." Ezra nodded. "You said you wanted to create something that made people feel less alone. You said you wanted to build something that lasted longer than your name." They both smiled faintly. She looked down at her mug. "You got lost." "I know. You hurt me. I know. And now," he exhaled, "now I want to learn how to stay." The words hung in the air between them, not trying to persuade, not begging, just true. Noor turned toward him fully. Her eyes were tired, but not guarded. "Don't chase me again," she said. Ezra froze. Then she added, softer this time, "Walk with me." He didn't reach for her hand. He didn't move closer. He just nodded. "I will." And that was enough. Not a reunion, not a confession, a beginning. If this story touched you, share it. Let someone who's hurting know healing is possible, not in one moment, but in many small ones. Moments where we choose presence over pride, stillness over noise, and walking together over running alone. Not all endings close with final words. Some just pause, quietly, so healing can keep unfolding. Ezra didn't lose Noor in one decision. He lost her over time, not by hurting her with cruelty, but by forgetting to keep seeing her when life got louder than love. There's a difference between looking at someone and truly seeing them. Looking checks the box. Seeing changes you. He looked at Noor for years, across tables, across rooms, and assumed that love alone would hold. But love, without attention, starts to dim, not because it's weak, but because it needs light to grow. Ezra chased success because he thought it would bring peace. But peace doesn't live in things. It lives in presence, in accountability, in knowing when to stop running and start listening. Noor didn't choose Ronan out of passion. She chose purpose, a direction that allowed her to lead, to heal, to serve. And Ronan, for all his history, knew when to step back so someone else could rise. In that, rivalry became something unexpected, respect. And Ezra, he didn't win Noor back with speeches. He didn't need a second chance to own her love. He needed one to honor it. And once he let go of control, he found a way forward, not by reclaiming the past, but by walking towards something new. Beside her, not every story needs a grand ending. Sometimes healing is just two people sitting in silence, not because they've run out of words, but because they've finally started listening. Ezra didn't rewrite history. He didn't get a perfect reunion. He got something better: clarity. He learned that guilt can't fix what distance created, that a child's eyes often see what adults refuse to face, that sometimes the strongest thing a man can do is stop chasing and start walking beside the one he once left behind. Noor never needed someone to carry her. She needed someone who would stay when things got still, when the spotlight faded, when nothing sparkled but trust. Ronan, once a symbol of conflict, became something else entirely, not a rival, but a man who learned to step aside without bitterness. And Micah, he never needed his parents to be perfect. He just needed them to be present. So, if you've ever lost something because you stopped paying attention, if you've ever wondered whether redemption still has a seat at the table, let this story remind you, it's not too late to return with open hands. It's not too late to walk forward, not alone, not ahead, but together.